I'm Bob Copus. I go by Robert Christopher Copus for my book, and I live in Amsterdam. I've been working with Darren to do the audio part of my latest book. My latest book is Impressions of Near-Death Experiences. And I was in finance. I have been studying economics, but I took an interest in near-death experiences after I read the book by Raymond Moody. That was quite long ago. He wrote it in 75, and I read it 2 years later. And especially the part where there is someone talking about her near-death experience, and in the near-death experience, there is a life review. And in the life review, she said there was no judgment. And that really uh, resonated with me. It stuck with me, and it made me think this is the real thing. Because I was raised Roman Catholic, and in Roman Catholicism, there is hell and purgatory. And I never really believed that was right. And here in this book was a woman who told that that's not the case. There's no judgment. And I thought that was really that. It's really, it's true. So that's where I started having my interest in NDEs, near-death experiences.
Hmm. So what made you pick up Raymond Moody's book for the first time?
I was at the time I was studying economics, but as an economist, you can also be interested in spirituality, and that was the case with me. And I read all kinds of books then, and I didn't quite like all the other books because they were like woo-woo. It was a lot of things that I couldn't relate to. But these things were where there were so many people having some kind of experience where they were near to death. They were in a medical critical situation, clinically death. Yeah, that's and then speaking about this experience where they go through a tunnel and see light at the end of the tunnel, have visions of deceased relatives and conversations with them, and meaningful conversations with them, like information that this person, the NDER, didn't have, and then with this information they got on the other side, something made sense or so. So that was some kind of proof for me. And now we know that not everyone goes through a tunnel. There are also people that have an NDE in a different way, not only by being clinically dead. They have these experiences under when they have a psychological crisis or in deep meditation or deep prayer. And occasionally even we came across a number of people who had them spontaneously. So that there is much more to tell about NDEs. It's not everyone has the same NDE. They're all different. And the problem with NDErs is that when they want to tell what they had gone through, um, they lack the words. They say they don't have, there are no words enough in our language. Doesn't matter which language you're talking, but in human language, we don't have words and concepts enough to explain what they have gone through. And the other side, where they have been, they are really, really sure and very certain that they have been in the other side. And some have also say that they have been dead. That the other side is real, much more real than where we are now. So there are so many differences in what they go through compared to what we go through in normal life here when we do groceries or when we do our work or go from one place to the other.
Mm. And so, of course, from your book, you compiled a various of these different experiences, and that came from, I suppose, both reading about these experiences and performing interviews and doing research yourself. So what kind of research have you done in the subject?
Well, I spoke with a lot of people that I met on conferences, both in the US and in the Netherlands and in Germany. And I read a lot of examples. There are archives in the US with the International Association of Near-Death Experiences that has a very big archive of NDEs. Anyone who has had an NDE can submit it in this archive. And there's another archive, the Near-Death Experience Research Fund. It's NDERF.org, where you can also find a lot of these experiences. And yeah, so that's how I came across them. And what for me is very important as a scientist, I mean, I was economist, I still am, but for me, it's important to have some kind of proof that these experiences are real, because otherwise they will just remain fairy tales and very nice stories to listen at. But you know, there are a lot of NDErs that have seen things while being outside their body, because not always people, when they exit their body, they go immediately through this tunnel or in another way to this other worldly environment. They can just roam around a little bit and then see what the doctors do, or what happens at the crash site of their car. And then later, what they see can be sometimes independently verified and confirmed. And those instances and those examples are very, very important. And those don't only comprise examples where people see something in the earthly environment, like in the operating dome or in the crash site, but also when they are on the other side. They typically say that they were on the other side in heaven, or whatever name they want to give to it. And sometimes they have a meaningful conversation there with things that they take back home. To just give you an example, there is this a story of a woman who had a near-death experience and then winds up in this place where she sees all these deceased relatives. She recognizes all of them except for one. It's a man, but he presents himself as a baby boy. And then he says to her, "You have to remember how I look like, and ask your father about me." And so she remembers how he looks like and the clothes he was wearing. And then later, when she was resuscitated and recovered, then she went to her father and talked about this. And then the father said, that must have been your baby brother that died before you, but died within a day or within a few hours or so. And they never spoke about him. So in order not to, yeah, to confront her with something that was painful for them, or it was painful for them, and that's why they didn't want to speak about it. But now she confronted him with this, then he couldn't just say no. And those instances, those examples, there are a lot of those examples, and they are also published in a book published by the International Association of Near-Death Experience, just like my book was published there. And just to flash another book at you, this is the other book. I try not to make too much light there. It's The Self Does Not Die, and there's hundreds of examples of the ones that I just spoke about in it. So it gives you circumstantial evidence that these NDEs are real.
And so, would you like to just mention a little bit about your impressions of near-death experiences book and how that came about and what's the content of that? Because of course, as you say, we've been working together. I've been recording your audiobook version for that. So, I suppose people would find it interesting to hear about that project.
Yeah, you did a great job there. Your voice is very nice, and I checked all the chapters that you read out loud, and it's really nice to listen to you. And the book, when I started, after I read the book by Raymond Moody, I was captured by it, but I wanted to know more about NDEs, but I didn't want to go through the whole story. I wasn't really interested in how people die or how people get this kind of experience. I was interested in the experience itself. So when they have meaningful conversations or when they get messages, that was the point that I was interested in. I would have loved to read a book like that. And 5 years ago, I thought, I want to make such a book. In that book, there would be not me talking. I want to have a book where NDErs talk. So actually, because there are so many NDErs in my book, more than 100 with hundreds of quotes, I just wanted to show to the reader a lot of quotes and then organize by chapter, by topic. So, for instance, there would be, of course, the topic, how do you get out of your body? And how do you get into it again? And the after effects. But especially also chapters about love, the unconditional love that everyone sees on the other side. Um, Life reviews that I spoke about before. Also, why are we on Earth? There's a lot of people that hear something about that. That's very interesting. Also, distressing NDEs is a chapter there. That this other world is so strange and so different, that we are all very important. And I forget a few chapters, but those are the important. Oh, being one. That's one of the most important chapters. The two things that stick out for me in an NDE are the unconditional love, because almost everyone speaks about that. Almost all NDErs do that. But the other thing that I think is number two is that we are at least very closely interconnected with each other. So every human being is connected to others, to all the others. So also to the people that you don't want to be connected to. We are all connected with each other on a different plane. But some say it goes even further than that. So we are actually one, or that we are God. Those quotes are really far out, but I have to give them to the reader, because there are so many of those quotes of people that say, we are part of God. We have the divinity within us. We are all together. We are God, or everything is God. Everything is God. So we are all one. And that gives some kind of, if you think about that, it, it's very interesting to think about that, that we are all one, that actually you're sitting there in England and I'm sitting here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. But in fact, we are the same, from the same substance, from the same source. And also your listeners, everyone.
I think it's such a foreign concept to our society that it's very difficult to wrap your head around. And one thing that I picked up on when reading your book, which is a subject that you mentioned is very important, but it isn't spoken about very much or written about very much, is the distressing near-death experience. You hear very many stories of very pleasant experiences in an afterlife, but very few about the negative, which do happen. So what are your takes on those experiences?
Yeah, first of all, I prefer to talk about not about negative experiences, but distressing experiences. They can be uh, they vary from not very pleasant to really hellish. And the reason why I want to speak about distressing NDEs and not negative is that there is an indication that people who've had such an experience also have changes in their lives that they later find very positive. So it is, one person even wrote a book about these examples, and she called it um, blessings in disguise. Um, uh, and that's what they are. So, and distressing NDEs, the number of NDEs in general from people who've had a cardiac arrest, if we only look at those, it's like 20 or 30 or 40%, but not 40. It's more like 20 to 30% of the people that have a cardiac arrest have such an NDE, and the subset of the NDEs is distressing. So it's a very small number, but yet the number is big enough to say it's not an anomaly. So it's real. There's something real going on there. Now, we want to understand that, but not everyone comes out and tells us that they have had a distressing NDE, because that's not something that you'd like to say to others. So that's difficult to research. However, we know by now there's a lot of a sufficient number of NDEs, distressing NDEs, that we know. And what we know is that you cannot say that people who have been bad, and then bad is something, how do you define bad? But with bad behavior, they only have distressful NDEs, and good people, or the common people who don't do very bad things. I mean, everyone does bad things once in a while, but not really bad. They will have blissful NDEs. That's not the case. We know of a number of people who've had a distressing NDE and who have had just a very common life, just like any one of us, nothing special. And we know of some people, at least in my book, I write about, especially about one, Damien Brinkley, who says of himself that he has been a horrible person and who had been killing people, adversary, so how do you say that? I can't. The people that are on against the U.S. Or the enemies of the U.S.
Yeah.
So the enemies of the
Adversaries.
U.S. Adversaries. Oh, you do that right.
I'm a writer. I have to.
For me, as a Dutch person, some words are difficult to pronounce. So adversary. No, I can't.
Adversaries. Yeah.
Adversaries. Okay. Those he killed a lot of those in other countries, and he also killed more people than only those because they were bystanders. They were collateral damage. You wouldn't say that would be a nice person or a good person. Yet he had a wonderful, a blissful NDE. Nothing awful there. The only thing that he said was awful was the life review that he had, because in his life review he had to relive all his kills, as he said himself. He became the receiver of his actions. So he became, that's the interesting thing of life reviews. You become the other, you become the receiver. You will feel what the other person has felt as if you are the other person, with every detail imaginable. So, and he said also the children and the wives of these people that he killed, he could feel what they had gone through after their husband or father was dead.
Indeed. And it makes you wonder, does there seem to be any link between religious beliefs and expectations versus whether an experience is positive or negative or distressing, or the content of it? So, for example, someone who maybe...
No, there is no, not that I know of, that there is. I mean, it's not like if you're a Catholic or Hindu or so, you don't have any distressing NDEs. There's, anyone can have an NDE and anyone can have a distressing NDE. Oh, that's important to mention also, since we're still talking about distressing NDEs. The reason why people would have an NDE, that's still not really known. It's difficult to research that, but what we can say is that there is a theory that there might pop things up in your NDE that come from the collective conscious. or that are in your personal conscious, or that were there in your life that you were afraid of. And I must say there are a number of people that I know that have said that they were very much into Roman Catholicism with hell and purgatory, and they were so afraid of that. And they were taught over and over again that if they did wrong things, they would go to hell. So once they were in their near-death experience, they experienced this distressing environment because they were so much afraid of it. One person also spoke about the details in that distressing NDE, and later she realized that she had been so afraid of being raped, of attracting AIDS. She had been raped two times, I think. And she was so much afraid of having that happen again that those were the things that also popped up in her distressing NDE, and also the AIDS aspect, and a lot of other things that she could trace back to her own fears that she had. And that's so the idea is that it comes either from your own conscious or your own background, what you experienced in life or where you were afraid of, or that it pops up from the collective conscious. And that's a psychological term that was introduced by Carl Gustav Jung.
Or indeed a mixture of both sources.
Yeah, of course it can be a mixture of both things. Yeah. Yeah, and this is really a subject that still needs to be researched more. It's but it's difficult. Researching NDEs as such is also difficult because what they are talking about is this otherworldly environment that is so different. There's every NDEr has difficulty in telling or recounting what they have gone through or what they have experienced, because they don't know what it is. Some people say, I will try to remember what this is, and they lose it when they are here. And interestingly, one person said, when she was on the other side, she said, I knew everything. This was so easy, so simple. I wondered why, while on Earth, we cannot see it because it's in plain sight. It is just here, but we fail to see it. And then she thought of one sentence that would say it all. And then she held on to that one sentence, and that was, all is everything and everything is one. All is everything and everything is one. And I always love that sentence because it gives also the impression of that we are one. And also, if you look at live reviews where you can access or feel what the people feel who you interacted with, that is only possible when we are one, when there's a oneness. How else can I feel what you feel?
If there's no link.
If there's no link. There is a link. That's why I can feel what you feel. Not now. I need to die first. But then I would be able to see every detail of your life. And also what I do to you at the moment, or yeah. So with everyone, so also with other people that you interact with in life.
And of course, then the follow on how your influence to that person then influenced other people indirectly that other person then interacted with.
Yes, it sounds like too much to understand, but while you're on the other side, it seems that everything is so clear. It's so obvious. It's so, everything. You can know the number of hairs on your head. You know everything. But we don't know that when you come back again.
It
And
makes sense.
interestingly, another NDEr said something like, it's the light is everywhere. We fail to see it here, while we are here, sitting here, and the light that is shining on my face is not the same light. It's the light, the divine light. But he said it is everywhere, but you fail to see it. And he compared that to the air pressure that is pressing up on every one of us. And that's in metrics, it's 1 kilo per square centimeter. You don't feel it, but it's there. And in the same way, he said, the light is here. The light is everywhere, in the chairs, in the flowers, in the cupboards, in the people, in the trees, everywhere. And you don't see it, but it's there, in plain sight. It hides in plain sight.
It's kind of, I suppose, the same as imagining a deep sea fish trying to conceptualize what water is. And because that's all it's ever known, it doesn't have any concept of what not water would be.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So just taking a brief step back and playing devil's advocate for a moment, when we talk about experiences that seem to encompass parts of someone's beliefs, so it's well known that, you know, Christians often have experiences of meeting Jesus. Not Hindus. Muslims have the experience commonly of meeting, you know, Muhammad and their religious figures. Hindus indeed do have experiences of meeting their deities. One could argue, and many do argue, that is evidence or proof, indeed, in some bold cases, that these experiences are purely fabrications of expectation or of our hallucinating mind during death. What do you think to that kind of explanation?
There is a difference between hallucinations and these experiences. That's for one. Hallucinations are chaotic. There's no storyline, while NDEs are very clear. There is a storyline in it. It makes sense. It's totally different. But as to seeing Jesus or Muhammad or Krishna, not all Christians see Jesus. It's a very small subset, just a few, well, many, but still a few of the total amount of people that have an NDE. The idea is that if you are there is some kind of cultural coloring that also coincides with what I said just before with NDEs, with distressing NDEs. There is some kind of thing that is still there that comes from your own background. Well, it could be your fears, but it could also be the strong belief in Jesus, or your strong belief in Krishna that makes you see Krishna or so in the light. So people would typically see light or the light, and if they see the light, it's like this is a very powerful entity. Sometimes it presents itself as a person, sometimes it is not a person, but maybe they then see their deity in it. And I came across just a few cases where someone of a specific religion saw also deities from another religion. And those two cases that I know of, they saw a lot of people. So they saw Jesus and Muhammad and Osho and some others, not all the same, of course, because there were two different people, but they saw a lot of deity figures in their NDE. But typically it would be just only one if they see a deity in their NDE.
Another common rebuttal that we hear a lot in regards to books like your own and The Self Does Not Die, to which some, you know, well-educated people also claim, is that despite it being interesting, they are just books of anecdotes, which, although interesting, don't offer any insight into whether there's a life after death or not. What do you think to that argument?
My book is actually indeed, there's a lot of quotes in it, or anecdotes, but I selected my quotes from open sources, people who really believe that what they have gone through is real. And again, for me, these are very nice stories. And in order to give some kind of proof, circumstantial evidence, that's where I think the veridical observations are so very, very important. It is it is very important that these kind of experiences, veridical observations or verifiable out-of-body experiences, that there are many of those, and we need to get more of them, because there are hundreds of them now, and maybe later there will be thousands. How can you ever say that it's not true if there are independent confirmations of things that were seen in an NDE, and independently verified by some third party?
And
That
these
is important for me.
Yeah, as it is for me as well. And especially when these third parties are professionals, doctors and consulting physicians,
Yes.
etc. Although I have heard it said that Titus's book, The Self Does Not Die, which is purely based on veridical observations, is
Yes.
also non-valuable because it is, again, just anecdotes. How would you differentiate, say, that kind of experience from the colloquially known anecdote?
Well, the problem with studying NDEs is it's not repeatable. For science, things need to be repeatable, or reproducible. Prospective studies, though that's a technical term for those. So you have to be able to do it again. And that's not possible with NDEs, with NDE stories, because it's immoral to make someone die and to get them back again quickly. That's because maybe that you are not quick enough and they really die. So you were a murderer. So that's not possible. But there has been prospective research, and the first research that was done in this respect was done in the Netherlands as well, by a group of people around Pim van Lommel. And what they did is they had a protocol where every person that was brought into one of the 10 hospitals that were participating over a lengthy period of time were taken into the database after they were successfully resuscitated, and they were brought in with a cardiac arrest. So people with a cardiac arrest in these hospitals that were resuscitated successfully, otherwise you can't talk to them later on, were taken into the database. And the only question asked was, do you have a recollection of the time that you were out? And astonishingly, there were like 18% of the people that were in the database of 344 people had a recollection, and those were the NDEs. And the interesting thing is that you have two groups now, one without an NDE and one with the NDE. And then you can compare them and see if there is anything different between these two groups. Because if you find something that's different between these two groups, then that might be the cause for having an NDE. Well, the point is that there were no differences. They all were having a lack of oxygen. They all were dying. So the substances that are created in the brain, in a dying brain, would be the same for the group with NDE and without the NDE. And the fear of in religion was researched, and medicine was researched. So there were a few factors researched. There were no differences. Age, no difference. Men, women, no difference. So, and that was a study that was reproduced also in the UK and in the US with the same results. So it rules out that a lack of oxygen or substances in the brain that are created in a period of dying would be the cause of NDEs.
So, based on your research over the years, What do you think one can expect at the moment they take their last breath, experientially?
What I think will happen is that it is a process. What typically happens is that you first leave your body. Sometimes people look back and then they don't recognize themselves because they see themselves in 3D. Normally, we see ourselves in a mirror or on a picture, but it's apparently it's very different if you see yourself in 3D. Some people don't recognize themselves immediately. It takes like a fraction of a second that they realize that they are there. That is themselves. So that happens, and then they sometimes it takes a long time before they go into this otherworldly environment. So they can roam around, they can walk around or walk. They don't walk. They fly. They float, whatever. They can be in all places that they want to be. There are stories of people that have been well, thinking of their, in this case, his mother, and then he was suddenly in the kitchen of his mother's house, some 100 kilometers away from where he was in the hospital, and she was not aware of him having a an accident. And he could see what she was doing, and at the same time, he could see what the doctors were doing in the hospital, and at the same time, he could see also in a friend's house. And that is the period that you are still on Earth. Sometimes people then go to this otherworld environment, but they somehow still have an attachment to the world. If they turn around, they can see what is happening with their body, but on the other hand, they can see the otherworldly environment where they want to go. And then some people are being sent back again. Some people want to go back by themselves. And then what happens later, I don't know. I mean, people talk about this world that they sometimes stay in for quite a while on Earth it's just maybe minutes or seconds. And some people say that they find a barrier, and if they cross over that barrier, they are aware that they will not be able to return again. So the people that we speak to have not crossed that barrier because we otherwise they couldn't have gone back again. So other people would cross that barrier, and what happens then, you don't know. One NDEr had this I like that so much. She said, leaving your body is such a nice thing because you are liberated. There's such a freedom. You don't have any anxieties. You don't feel your body. It's wonderful. You only are your consciousness. And then she says, but later on, I felt like even my consciousness would be dissolved in the Godhead, or the word that we have for the Godhead. So, what she actually said is, she thought perhaps we would be diluted into this oneness, or in this in God. That's what she actually said. So we don't know what happens.
To put things simply, yeah. But there are certainly enough accounts to say that something certainly happens, and it might not be quite the same for everybody, at least in the initial stages. And from what I've read in your book, and indeed in other books, and having spoken to some people, it seems as well that these environments are very much malleable to one's own wants, desires, expectations. You know, the example I give is if someone wants to fly around on a dragon in a amazing fantasy kingdom, if that's what they want, then maybe that will materialize for them through their own mental state, you know.
Yeah, I came across those kind of stories too. It's like one of them in my book is of a woman who had been hanging in this velvety, dark area that felt very nice. A lot of love there. And she floated there, and it was wonderful, she said. But after a while, she was like, wow, I'd like to see something. And then came a pair of hands with a lot of brushes came along and painted the scene that she loved, with rolling hills and butterflies and trees and flowers and stuff like that. So, and that is, and she said, that is the thing that I wanted to see. And the same with other people. I've heard someone else say the same kind of thing. She said, I was in this wonderful garden, and if I could choose a garden myself, it would be that. That's the thing that I wanted to see.
So it seems that perhaps in some fundamental way our mind is dictating to some degree what we experience in those states.
Yeah, but perhaps only in the first phase. I also like to think of it in this way, that we are all on a stage. We're doing a play. There's this play that we are all involved in. We all have a role. You have your role, and I have my role, and each of your listeners has a role. But once we step off the stage, meaning when we die, we are not the person that we were playing. I mean, I'm not King Arthur anymore. Supposedly, I played King Arthur or a villain or whatever. I go home not being the villain or King Arthur. I go home as Bob. Um, but in this analogy, it is when I step off the stage, I will not be Bob anymore. I will be the divine itself, because that's the core of everyone. There's a light within everyone. That's what I understand from NDEs. There is light, or there's divinity within us, and that's the thing that remains, and it's only love, that because unconditional love is within everyone. It's unimaginable, perhaps, if we look out and see the news nowadays. But that's what I understand. It's we are all uh, uh, love, and that's the core of us, and that will go to the other side.
And that's a difficult thing to imagine as human, is because love, as we understand it, is a concept. And to say that we are love is very difficult to imagine, I suppose, unless you've had that experience. So what sort of things have you heard about to describe what that means precisely?
You know, the word love or unconditional love that you hear so often in NDEs, if you really ask people about it, they say the real thing is much bigger than that. It goes beyond that. And I don't know what that means. Even with love, it's difficult to wrap your head around that. Of course, everyone knows somehow some bit of love, either from your parents or from your children or from the person you love or your friends. But then unconditional love is the next phase. Unconditional, even parents have their conditions with children. So unconditional love is something that you cannot wrap your head around. But going even further than that, then that's the next level. And I have no idea how to picture that.
No. I think we can kind of get as close as we can to the concept of unconditional love, maybe by looking at a dog or a pet or an animal.
Yeah. Yes.
But again, that's different to having the experience yourself and knowing what that really means. But we can at least see examples of that, I think, in animals, dogs especially.
Yes. Yes.
So
cats have more. They're more they have conditional love.
Cats, I don't know much about because I've only ever had dogs, and rats. They're probably the same, but I can't remember. I was too young.
Yeah. Dogs is a good example. Dogs are really they are always happy if they see you.
Indeed, no matter what you do to them or how you treat them.
Yes.
Which is
often also
sad.
I understood that also when you treat a dog bad, they will still love you when you come back again.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Which is why I can't ever get into the mind of someone who mistreats animals.
No,
I
no, me
can't
neither.
understand it.
No, no.
One of the chapters in your book, which was kind of a key point as well, was talking about as you said, the light. And when most people, I think, who maybe haven't done as deep a dive into near-death experiences, which is most people, would think of that as kind of a train tunnel with a light at the end of it. But from what I gather, that light is a lot more than just a visual light. Could you describe more about the light itself, what people experience it as?
The light comes in very different ways, in very many ways. It is at the end of a tunnel. It's like yeah, it's that's how I picture it at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes people say I was in a dark space and there was a speck of light and that came closer, or I came closer to the light. You don't know whether the light comes to you or you come to the light, maybe both. But then some people do see figures in the light, or one figure, or
Or
they
indeed, they describe the
see.
figure as the light as a being itself.
Yeah, but that differs as well. There's some people describe God as a man, sometimes as a woman, sometimes as something that is not both, as something else. It's there are so many different descriptions of God or of the light. Um, so it's difficult to really categorize that or to say this is the way it is. Some people don't see the light. They just say I was in a very light environment and I had the conversation with these wise men that I saw, or a wise man, or there was a person sitting next to me with a hood on. That's also something you hear more often, because sometimes it seems that you are not supposed to see who that is, or someone sits next to this person on a bench in the other side, and then they don't want to look because they don't want to see how what that is or who that is, but it feels like love, but they are so afraid of looking, or yeah, something like that.
And it seems very interesting that these experiences sound like they should be very, very close to, talking about love and loving each other and loving everything and being love indeed. Sounds very close to what many religions are
Yeah.
believed to teach, and yet they seem again so different in many other ways. For example,
Yes.
the judge concept, which I struggle to align myself with, and as a Roman Catholic kind of base yourself, you probably would know about the whole idea of if you don't believe, you go to hell for eternity.
Yes.
And yet, that to me seems the very antithesis of unconditional love.
Yeah, but this shows you that religions have been made or partially made by people, especially men are good at that. They exclude others. So if you're not Catholic, then you go to hell. If you're not a Muslim, you go to hell. If you're not a Jew, you go to hell. That's not the case. And on the other side, there is a big inclusion. There's no exclusion. That's what I understand from NDErs. Everyone is welcome there. And religions, they all say, in one way or another, what you want for yourself, do that also to others. But if you see what the practice is, how they put it into practice, that's far from what they do. Maybe for their own group, or well, if you look at the Ages in our countries, we put people to death on the stake if they didn't do exactly what we said in a religious way of speaking. Um, So, but that's not the case on the other side. There's no exclusion. Even atheists have been said that they have seen the light, have had an NDE. Anyone can have it.
Mm. Many indeed speculate that maybe the great teachers of these core religions, Jesus and Muhammad and others, and Buddha, maybe their understandings and their teachings stemmed from an experience like a near-death experience.
Yes.
Which have been, I suppose, over many, many years, as you'd expect, have been misunderstood or mistranslated, etc. Because the messages from, as you say, the core teachings sound very similar to what the near-death experiences also talk about.
You know, just taken as an example, Jesus, what he says at one point, and several points in the Bible, and I'm looking only at the Gospels because everything else is added later or previously, the Old Testament. But he says at one point, what you do to the least of us, you do for me, meaning that, well, you can read it as this least of us is also me. So you do what you do to him or her, you do for me. And in another place, he is asked by the Pharisees what the most important commandment is, and then he says, you have to love God with all your heart and all your mind. And the second commandment, equal to that, he adds that to that. The second commandment, equal to that, is to love your neighbor like you love yourself. And that's an interesting phrase because what he there equates is God, your neighbor, and yourself. I find those passages very interesting.
Indeed, almost as if he's as you say, synonymizing mankind with God, saying that we are all a part of God, as the NDEs do often say, or almost always say, really.
Yeah. So I think maybe you can never prove that, of course, but maybe he has had an NDE himself,
or
a deep
some kind of
one.
spiritually transformative experience. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 You don't have to have an NDE in order to change. Everyone who had an NDE changes thoroughly, but people sometimes have a spiritually transformative experience, which is something similar, but then without being near to death. And what I say is, I find the term near-death experience too confining because it's broader than that. You don't have to be near to death in order to have such an experience. You can also be having a psychological crisis or meditating very deeply or just spontaneously.
I suppose the near-death experience is a label to describe a transformative experience that happens at death, but that same experience is possible through other means, as you say.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's difficult to well, in science we also always want to have clear definitions of everything, but this is difficult.
Have you looked much into other experiences surrounding this area of interest other than near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, mediumship, meditation, psychedelics, that sort of thing?
No, not really. I did some. I saw a lot of people having had a shared death experience. Those are interesting. I mentioned two of those in my book. It's where someone really dies, so doesn't come back again, but someone else that's present in the same room as the person that is dying travels with this person for a little while, goes into this light, sees that this other person goes further, and in one case the other person turns around and says, it's not your time, you have to go back again. And then this other person that's not the NDER just falls back again, or that's the NDER that falls back again because that's the person that we can speak to. The other one really dies. So that's a shared death experience. So this person that comes back again to where we are, the NDEer, experiences the death of someone else in a very close way, as if it's an NDE.
Have we had cases of shared near-death experiences, or shared death experiences, I suppose, where both parties have come back and reported the same thing?
Yeah, that's in the book. There is one case where, and that's interesting. I thought that was very interesting. This case, this man was sitting at the deathbed of a little boy who had been in a traffic accident together with his mother. His mother had already passed away just days before, and he was struggling for his life, but he wouldn't make it. And so the person that I speak about, the NDEer, the shared death NDEer, was sitting at the bed when this little boy passed away. But he went with his little boy when he saw that the mother came and scooped the little boy out of its body, and he could travel with them, with both of them, a little bit, so that he had a stretch of, I don't know how you measure that, but a little time that he could be with them, going into this light area, and then uh, he had to go back again. He was pulled back again into his body, and then later in life he spoke with one of the other people who was present in this room, who said that she had the same that she had this experience, and then only then they realized that they both had the same experience, but they hadn't seen each other. They had only had this experience where they were traveling together with the boy and the mother, and hadn't seen each other. Only when they spoke with each other years later, they realized. That's a really interesting and strange story.
It is almost as if it's happening on two timelines at the same time.
Yeah, time is different on the other side. Apparently there is no time, or there is something strange going on with time, or all time is there at the same time. I love that expression, because it gives the idea that you can look through time, that you can see history and you can see the future. That's also what people say.
And again,
I could see through time.
Another concept that's impossible for our human minds to wrap our head around. Yeah. But again,
so we can't look at these things with our experiences on Earth. It's totally different. It's something else, and it's more real. That's what the NDErs say.
And do you think that difficulty in conceptualizing of these things is one of the reasons why modern science struggles to accept that these experiences take place, or at least are real experiences?
Yeah, because I think that for scientific people, scientists, is difficult to, they are trained to see proof and real proof, repeatable true proof. And that's difficult in this case. But the interesting thing is, if you look at science at this moment, there is quantum mechanics. And the thing with quantum mechanics is that we discover that there's things going on with time. That's also with what Einstein, in his relativity theory, discovered. Time is relative. But with quantum mechanics and aligning these two theories with each other, is that time is no issue, or is just one equation in a whole bunch that can where it can change. It's not linear. It's different, and that things can be aligned. There's an alignment between particles that is. I don't understand that, but there is an alignment between particles that's possible. While these particles are far away from each other, they act the same way. So there's a lot of things in science to be discovered, and maybe it will come closer to, well, through science, we might come closer to understanding NDEs.
What do you think on the relationship between mind and brain? Because, of course, we know that the correlation is very tight. If you damage your brain, your experience of consciousness changes or becomes prohibited. If you take some kind of anesthetic drug, you apparently lose consciousness. And those are arguments, strong arguments really, that the brain is the producer of consciousness.
Yes.
And so that would then imply that these near-death experiences don't mean a thing because it's in the brain. Once your brain dies, you die. What do you think to that kind of thinking?
Well, that's the idea that the brain produces the consciousness, because we always see when the brain dies, the consciousness is gone. But with these NDEs, the stories go on. They don't stop at the physical death or when the body is in a state where there's no electric things going on, no heartbeat, no respiration. So apparently there is a situation where a situation is possible where the mind still is there while the brain is damaged. And how that works, I don't know. There's a theory that the brain is just a receiver, like a television set is a receiver of the program that is somewhere else. The program is in the studio, and that's real. But the radio set or the television set just reproduces the real thing. So you have to picture the television set as the body or the brain. And when the television set is damaged, so when the brain is damaged, it doesn't mean that the real thing is not has stopped. No, the concert is going on in the studio somewhere else.
That's the idea that the brain is kind of a translator of consciousness into the world that we can use.
But how to prove this? That's difficult.
Well, that's one of the arguments I've heard against that. I can't remember who was it that I brought it up to. It might have been Gerald Verley. I can't remember. The argument anyway was, well, if this is an interaction in that sense, then we would see biomarkers of consciousness being received into the brain that we haven't found. So therefore, there's no reason to believe it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like what I understand from NDErs is that some people really feel their consciousness leave their body. Some people do see some kind of cord that's still attached to the body, but people feel that there's one case that I know of that a person said I was the feeling of my consciousness leaving my body from my feet up to my head. I was leaving through my head, but also my arms. The consciousness withdrew from my arms. I don't know. These are the stories of NDErs. So what the real thing is, I don't know. I'm not a brain scientist.
No, indeed. So from all the NDEs that you've heard and read and spoken about, what do you think is the strongest aspect of them, evidentially, that overthrows the idea that these are tricks of a dying brain, only anecdotes and not valuable, etc., and the other explanations that come along with it? What do you think is the most evidential aspect of near-death experiences?
Those will be the veridical observations, there are so many examples. I like all the examples. Some are stronger than others, and in my book I have a few. One of them is, for instance, that a person was brought into the hospital. This is a famous case where, and she was unconscious, and while she was in the hospital, she had her NDE. She went out of her body and then went up to the ceiling. She went through the ceiling, and she came into this other room there, and she saw beds like in the normal hospital, in the rest of the hospital, but in the beds were dolls. And there were monitors and stuff, and then she went on through the roof, and then she had her NDE. But when she came back again, she said told this to people, and the people were really, the nurses were like, how can she know that? Because here above this floor, there is an instruction floor with beds and dolls where we can
training dummies,
with a training facility. And she had seen that, and she couldn't have known that. So there are many of those stories, and I find them powerful. For me, they are important.
So why do you think that they're still rejected, despite being so evidential and not one-off, but there are many, as you say, with the self does not die? And yet they're still not seen as anything other, really, than pseudoscience or anecdotes.
I don't know. For me, so many of these stories is so much circumstantial evidence. One story would not be believable for me, but many of them would make a case for me, because many of these cases is a database. In a database, you can do science. It's something that is that starts with creating proof. And the reason why people don't want to believe this, it's not about believing, but they refute all the evidence. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's because they're afraid, or they hold on very tight to their belief of that matter is the only thing there is. So that cannot be
I
this.
Suppose, indeed, you just said what I was going to say. Also, that it just can't be possible, and lack of actually reading the evidence, reading the literature. Because why should I? I already know it's impossible.
Yeah, if you have been always taught that that's not possible, then you will believe that to the extremes. It's difficult to change your paradigm in a way that you include something that was not believed before, but that's apparently there anyway.
Okay, so where can people find your book and now audiobook? And for anybody that is going to listen to the audiobook, bear in mind, it's the first one I've ever made. So I apologise, but as you say, it sounds okay. So
it's a wonderful audiobook. I think you did a great job on that.
I appreciate it.
Actually, I don't know where that is available. I know the book is available on Amazon, and also in a digital version, so on Kindle.
Because I think at the moment it's current, as we're recording this, it's still being accepted, isn't it, by Amazon?
Yes.
But I think it'll come up on...
It's not there yet.
Not there yet, but when it does, I think it will be on Audible, because that's Amazon's platform.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it'll be other places as well, I'm not sure, but I dare say you'll put a link to it and your book as well on your website.
Yes, my website is bobcopus.com, and people can find information about me and my books, and especially this book.